So I think many of us have seen the ads for the Neural DSP plugin sale that's going on right now to celebrate kind of their birthday. And so like many of you, I'm sure I went ahead and kind of ponied up for one of the plugins. In my case, it's the Soldano plugin because I wanted something compatible with the Quad Cortex, and the Soldano is an amp that I love on the Quad Cortex. I wanted to check it out. I'd done a video earlier that compared the plugin running on the computer to what was on the Quad Cortex. And at the time I found that, I thought the plugin sounded better, but it wasn't significantly better. It's like maybe a 10% increase in the quality. But before we get into checking out the preset, one of the things I do want to say is I'm seeing a lot of questions, especially I think the sale has driven a lot of this conversation of, hey, I'm thinking about buying a Quad Cortex, or I just bought a Quad Cortex, or I have one on order. What plugin should I buy? And my answer to those people, whether I'm, on a Facebook group or in the Neural DSP forum or people message me directly is, you don't need to buy a plugin. If you're new to the Quad Cortex, unless you're already using the Neural DSP plugins and you like them, go ahead and get your Quad Cortex, learn how to use it, get to know the models on the Quad Cortex, get to know all the captures that are available to you on the Cortex Cloud, maybe even check out some of the paid kind of premium captures you might get from Amalgam. There's all that available to you before you need to think about investing in a plugin. Now, it's not that the plugins don't sound good, they do, but I don't think they're that much better than what you can get just from your Quad Cortex, just from the Cortex Cloud. There's so many great tones you can get without having to invest in a plugin. So again, it's not that the plugins aren't good. They are good. They sound good, but you do not need to buy a plugin as soon as you buy a Quad Cortex. So get off my soapbox now, and we'll go ahead and check out the preset. So we go over here. I've got my preset up here, and if you're familiar with my presets, this will look very familiar. I run them kind of left to right from cleanest to heaviest. So the cleans are over here, maybe, and kind of the bottom row is a normal tone, and the top row is typically either a clean or maybe an extra effect or something. So, the first column is cleans, the second one's kind of lower gain stuff, and then I've got some rhythm tones and then some lead tones. So the general setup of the plugin is pretty straightforward. On the up front before the amps, I've got the Soldano compressor, and wherever possible, I'm trying to use the Soldano plugin devices. You can definitely mix and match this with everything else on the Quad Cortex. I'm just creating a preset trying to kind of highlight these capabilities. I've got the two overdrives. I've got the amp, and I've got it twice, and I'll explain why here. If I go look at the amps, on the Quad Cortex models, there's 3 amp models, one for the Crunch Bright, one for Crunch Normal, and one for lead. For the plugin, they've added these little toggle switches to allow you to switch between normal and OD. So the OD would be like the lead, and then you've got clean and crunch. There's no clean model on the Quad Cortex, but and we'll compare this against kind of my old Soldano preset that's just using these models. You can get cleans from the crunch model as well, and then you got the bright switch. But one of the things I wanted to point out, if you hover over this little eye, note that changing this parameter will cause a brief mute. And in my mind, that's really frustrating. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if we go to the comp clean, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on to scenes, and then we'll turn that to crunch. So now if I switch these, I'm switching between the channels. Let's go ahead and bring this down just so it's not too loud. So you hear how the signal drops. Like compare it to so that's because I'm trying to change this setting in the scene. And so what I ended up doing to avoid that is I have 2 versions of the same block type on the preset, because switching blocks, like turning them on or off, is seamless. So I can have this one setting to clean, this one set to crunch, and when I switch between these two like this, I just switch which block I'm using, and it's seamless, and I don't lose the signal at all. So the downside to that is it chews up CPU. So if I bring up the CPU meter here, you can see these are pretty heavy. And this is pretty prevalent on the plugin models. The plugin stuff tends to chew up more CPU than the kind of out-of-the-box stuff. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you want to have a preset where you're switching these settings in different scenes, the best way to do it, or at least a way to do it to avoid those interruptions, is to have two different models. And then for cabs, I'm not using the cab that came with the plugin. There is a cab that came with it. There's a mono version, a stereo version. I tried this out. I didn't like it, so I went ahead and stuck with IRs and cabs that I know I like. And for the cleanish and lower gain stuff, I'm using this Marshall IR from Amalgam. This is from their free IR pack on their website. And then I'm using the Mesa 4x12 with 330s, which is kind of my favorite cab on the Quad Cortex for kind of gainier stuff. There's no flanger with the Soldano plugin, so I'm just using the flanger engine that comes with the Quad Cortex. I have the Soldano chorus, I've got the Soldano delay, and I've got the Soldano reverb. I am changing some of the settings on the delay as I move around in terms of like the tone and the mix. You know, I'm bringing the mix down on the rhythm tones. I'm bringing some of the tone back on the leads just to warm it up. And then pushing the tone up a little bit on the clean stuff just to make it a little more sparkly. But let's hear how it sounds. So here's the clean tone. We'll bring up the amp. So you can see I got the gain about halfway, the master's at 10. I got the bright switch on, and I got it a little bit scooped. I'm bringing the mids back just a little bit. And then for the compressed clean, all I'm doing is I'm turning off the chorus and turning on the compressor. So it's a little bit of a boost. And then for this one, I'm switching to the crunch. I've got the gain about halfway. I'm turning on this overdrive. And for this one, we're pushing the gain up a little bit from 5 to 8. And then I'm just adding in that flanger. And then for the rhythm, I've got the gain at 8. The master's about halfway. Again, we're scooping it just a little bit. Just a nice basic rhythm. It does pretty well too for just kind of a low gain on the neck. And then for the heavier rhythm, I'm adding in this overdrive on the front. You can hear it kind of gives it a little bit of a mid boost. And then for the lead tone, it's basically that same tone, but with the compressor on the front, just add a little bit of a boost and a little bit of kind of sustain to it. And then for the heavy lead, I'm pushing the gain levels up a little bit from 8 to 10. And I'm using this overdrive, which is kind of more of a two screamer kind of thing. I'm just using it maybe to tighten up the low end a little bit. So just kind of a nice thick overdrive there. So that's this preset. And of course, this will be available on my Cortex Cloud account. You can go download it. And you can use it assuming you've bought the Soldano plugin. And obviously, if you download it and you've not bought that, it won't work for you. But let's go ahead and compare it against kind of my old Soldano preset that I created a few months back. So let's compare some of the clean tones. You can see here, it's a very similar setup. I'm using different delays, different reverbs, different overdrives on the front. The amps, I've got a crunch normal, and I'm using a lead. We won't compare this because I'm not using the lead on the other one. We are using the same exact IRs, so there's somewhat of an apples to apples comparison here. So let's go ahead and compare to the clean chorus here. So overall, I think they sound pretty similar. Obviously, there's difference in that on the Quad Cortex models. I'm using the crunch channel. I've got the gain at 4. So there's no real clean setting like there is in the plugin. So I think the plugin is a little more of a pure clean and maybe has a little more kind of top end to it, where the Soldano model on the Quad Cortex, because it's using a crunch channel, has maybe a little more kind of a mid warmth to it. They can make it sound a little dull, maybe. But pretty close. When we go to the rhythm tone, let me check out the rhythm on this one. I think the rhythm I have on this, I've got the gain a little bit lower. But they're pretty similar. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a back-to-back of kind of the gainier sounds and the clean sounds. You can kind of decide for yourself whether you kind of think the plugin is worth it. Like I said, to me, I think the plugin does sound better, but it's like it's 5%, it's 10%. It's not that much better. You can still get great sounds from the Quad Cortex. So unless you're really, hunting that extra 5 or 10%, I don't know that investing in the plugin is worth it. And like I said, I would definitely, if you're new to the Quad Cortex, get to know what's already on here. Go find some presets that you like, kind of learn about the models, explore some of the captures before you think about dumping more money into plugins because you feel like you need it. Plugins are great to kind of add in as an extra bonus, but there's so much here to get to know first, I think, before you need to make that investment. So, like I said before, this preset will be available on my Cortex Cloud account. Feel free to download it. Let me know what you think. Let me know, kind of what plugins you guys have been buying during the sale and what your thoughts are on kind of whether you feel like the plugins are really necessary in the Quad Cortex. Another interesting question that someone, asked me was, this is before the plugins were on sale. If you're comparing spending $100 on a plugin versus spending $100 buying, 3 or 4 capture packs from like Amalgam, what would you do? And my answer was I would probably invest in the capture packs because you can get, multiple capture packs of these really great amps that are really well done. And I think you can get a lot out of that. And I don't know that, the plugins, unless you're looking for something very specific, I don't know that the plugins are that much different. Now, some of the plugins that are coming up, like the Rabia plugin and things like that, are adding in capabilities that just don't exist anywhere else on the Quad Cortex. And so that's a different kind of thing, and that'll be different when it gets there. But for now, again, I would just say you don't need to buy plugins right away when you're getting a Quad Cortex. Check out the other stuff first, and then later on you can always jump into the plugins as you go. Anyway, hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching.